We are looking at this images of shelter this year. We started by looking at the homelessness of Israel in the wilderness. And I'd like to introduce you to something called the Seven Fires Prophecy. It's a very old story created by the Anishinaabe Indians, which comprise many tribes that you would recognize, the Creek, the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, the Potawatomi. These trace their origins to a group that used to live on the east coast of the United States, of the North American continent, and who migrated inland looking for a better home. Now you may say, my goodness, that sounds an awful lot like Israel and Egypt and how they went through the world. And it is, but they are completely unconnected because this prophecy dates back to the 7th century of our calendar. So apparently a whole other group of people have tied themselves and their identity to a narrative of wandering. And the 7 fires refer to prophets who lit up, who created a light for them to follow. Apparently, the story goes that they were told by their first prophet to leave the saltwater lake and move inland toward the Sweetwater Lake, and that they were to stop at a place called Turtle Island. And they thought the first island they came to was it, that is now Montreal. And then they discovered that wasn't it, and the second prophet said, no, you have to keep going further west. And they divided, and some went up the Ottawa River into what is now Ontario, and some went down the St. Lawrence, landing in current Detroit. They landed there apparently about 1,500 years ago, so I think that they would not recognize it now, although I think the urban homesteading they're planning there may restore some of its natural beauty. And then eventually those who landed in the Detroit area came across to western Michigan, and as I said at the early service, they stopped when they got to Benton Harbor. They literally did not go any further, and in fact they're referred to as the lost tribes because they did not know where to go next. And a third prophet arose and said, the Turtle Island is to your north. And so they went up the coast and found Manitou Island. And they discovered this really was Turtle Island according to the prophecy because cowrie shells are found all over it, and they took that as a sign. And the people from the north came down and they met up and they discovered their partners in wandering. Now I'm telling you this because we need to know that there are many stories of migration and wandering, that we all migrate and wander all through our lives. In fact, one of the great passages out of the Hebrew Scriptures is picked up in the New Testament when it says in the book called Hebrews, by faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to set out for a place that he was to receive as an inheritance, and he set out not knowing where he was going. The Anishinaabe did the same thing. They did not know where they were going to land. They just knew there was a promise, someplace over there that they were supposed to go, where they belonged. And some of them got lost and they did not know where to go. But my point here is that the narrative of migration is a universal narrative. Whether it's a pilgrim narrative on the ways of St. Diego de Compostela, whether it's a refugee narrative running ahead of the czar or ahead of oppression, whether it's fulfilling a promise or simply getting lost as William Least Heat Moon did, the idea that we find ourselves by losing ourselves is a key spiritual symbol. And we forget that in a world where we want everyone to be in one place. At the early service this morning, I said the most important element here is that if we wish to become more than we are, we have to move on from who we are to another person. And that can take place physically. It can take place emotionally. One of the great ways you can get lost in life, I know this, some of you do too, is to have a child. At that moment, you become a different person when that child arrives. Am I right? And as I pointed out, when my wife had when we first brought our oldest home, we kind of looked at each other and said, we have no idea what to do, how to be parents. And then it dawned on us with the help of grandparents that no one ever does. You have to get lost. Lose who you are to become what you must become, even when you don't know what the outcome is going to be. So these narratives of homelessness are narratives also of lostness, of finding, of becoming. And not being lost and then brought back to where you are, but of getting lost and discovering you belong there as well as here. That when you move into parenthood, you can never move back into being childless. When you move into marriage, even if you don't stay married, you always remember what marriage is. And like the arrow of time allows those of us who were young to grow old, but not us who are old to grow young, we can take ourselves with us into the future, into new places. We can get lost, but we can never go back. And I think that's one of the things that we need to lift up as a liberal faith. That we are a people on the move through time, through place, through mind and soul. That we are, in fact, on a spiritual journey that does not have an end. That, like Abraham, by faith we stayed for a time, but we went out for a place that we did not know where we were going to. The people who come to a church like this are truly children of Abraham, or the Anishinabeg. We live in spiritual tents, if you know what I mean. Despite these buildings, we live in a place that we can pick up and move. Or, for that matter, we are ready to go wherever the Spirit presses, like a sail on a ship. You ever thought about how a tent and a sail were made of cloth? Maybe if we presented our spirituality not as a place, but as a fabric, something we could wrap ourselves in when we're tired, we could hold out when we wanted to enclose, that we could hoist up when we wanted to announce, and we could use as a sail when we wanted to move. That kind of versatility and flexibility is what we're all about. Now, I've been thinking a lot about this in response to the national election, which took place just as I was getting out of town. And I have to admit, I was kind of grateful for not being able to watch CNN for a number of days. I look at that election and realize a lot of fear was involved. People afraid of losing things, of getting lost, of being neglected. A sense of dread and fear permeated so many people. They wanted to draw in, hunker down, pull up the covers, lock the doors, look backward, not forward. We all do it. All of us want to do it. But this nation and this church are founded on an openness, on hope. Abraham's sort of hope. The Anishinabeg sort of hope. To go to a place where we will become something more than we are. We're having our annual meeting in a few minutes. It's all about, the budget and who's running for the governing board and you getting reports, and that's important. That's very important. But I want to remind all of you who are members, and all of us, including yours truly, are members, that the leadership is not just accountable to you as members, that you as members are also accountable to all the other members, not only the ones who aren't here today, but the ones who sat here 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40, and who will be sitting here 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. This is the caravan that is not one of despair, as you heard the choir sing. It is a caravan that began in the 19th century and extends into a future we do not know because we can't go there. That we are all accountable. We are all accountable to this pilgrim church we live in, the one that wraps itself in blankets and wears robes and hoists itself on sails. Even we members are accountable to a liberal spirit that bids us to choose hope, even when we don't know exactly what we're hoping for. And that's why I tell you the story of the man at the pool in Bethsaida. What Jesus was saying is, if you wait until someone comes to find you, you will never get found. If you wait for someone to heal you, you will not get healed. If you wait for someone to come and take you where you need to go, you will never get there. You have to go.